When I was 15 years old, after much struggle, I finally accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior over my life. And you see, life wasn't that easy. I didn't really understand the decision I had made. All I knew that I needed was someone to take over, someone to guide me. And I was told Jesus would be. You see, it was quite difficult because every time they told me that he was a father, I closed up to him. My heart became numb because I had too many fathers in my life who disappointed me. And I didn't want to add to that list any other father. You see, I was born in the village to two parents who were not married. And my dad took off, didn't want the responsibility. My mom took off. And it was also simply because in my community then, this was an embarrassment. I was an oops baby, an embarrassment to the family. And the tradition was that this baby needed to be get rid of. And they could use any means. For my sake, they tried to poison me, and that didn't work. They tried other means. And sometimes it even included a child being left out in the night in the bushes so that an animal can come and take the child away. And in Africa, this could be a hyena, a lion, wild packs of wild dogs or something. But my great-grandfather took me with him, and they raised me up as one of their own. And so I grew up knowing my great-grandparents as my parents. And later I was introduced to my mom, and later I was taken to my relatives to live with them one after another, and it was abusive. I worked like a donkey, and I didn't go to school, and I just had no hope. I had no life. I didn't know what life was really. We ended up in the slums in Nairobi, where I was introduced to my stepdad, who later became violent, and very clear he communicated that he wasn't my father, and I needed to know that as early as possible. And so I grew up knowing that this is not my dad. So everything he did to me, he was resentful. He was abusive to my mom, abusive to me, and in my presence he would beat up my mom like he's fighting with a man. But I grew up in the slums, and by the time I was age 13, 14, I started getting into little petty crimes. Here and there I would break into people's properties and steal people's shops and stuff like that. My friends went to an extent of stabbing people and robbing from them, and sometimes harming people. And I know of people who died because of what my friends did. And I thank God that he protected me from all that. But I was getting there. Every day I was becoming more and more bold and wanting to do more and more bold things in order to prove a point and to survive. That's the life in the slums. Getting into a gang, you feel protected, accepted. And so at the age of 15, I got saved, and my life began to change. And slowly by slowly, I started staying off from these friends, but this wasn't the case. I remember one time we went stealing and we were caught, and we were locked up in a place for a whole week. And then later we were taken to a cell, and in the cell, we were robbing people in the cell. And my mom bribed the police, and I was released. And that was just the life. When I came back home from the cells, my stepdad kicked me out, and I had to fend for myself. Here I am, a Christian. I'm keeping the same friends. I've been kicked out and stuff like that. I continue to do the same. But one Saturday morning when I woke up, and on this Saturday morning, the community had gotten tired of young people like myself who had finished 8th grade and hadn't gone to high school, stabbing people and robbing from people. And so they started to go from one home to another, dragging out these young people and putting tires around them. They put paraffin or petrol around it, and then they light you on fire. And I saw my friends just burn up, go into flames. And I saw this group of people walking towards our home. And I ran back to my mom, and I told my mom, something is not right. They're killing my friends. And I can see a group of people coming this side. I think they're coming for me. And I started apologizing to my mom because she had done all these things, and she had warned me not to do this. But I was a Christian, you understand. I just wasn't walking with Christ. So these guys came at our door, knocked it out, and told my mom, hey, we want your son. And my mom said, my son is not here. So they beat her up, and then my mom eventually told them, you look inside. You see, we lived in this small house, 100 by 100 centimeters, and this guy just walked into the house and looked around, and he couldn't see anyone. So he looked at the corner, and that's where I was standing, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I'm telling you the truth. I saw him, and he saw me, and we saw each other. But a couple of minutes later, he turned around. And when he turned around, I noticed that on his right hand, he had a small axe that had blood stains on it. I just realized that had been used on someone, and I was going to be next. And so he stepped out of the house. And I know, folks, you're thinking that maybe the house was too dark and he needed more time for his eyes to adjust. Well, that could be true. Science could be true. But I know for sure they knew, because they had seen me walk into the house. Secondly, he had enough time to be able to do this, to be able to have his eyes adjusted. So my mom walked in after they had left, and she told me to go away. And she sent me to a place I used to go every week when we closed school, and that place was Word of Life. So I ended up at Word of Life, and I started serving at Word of Life as an 8th grader. And by the time I was 24, I went to my 9th grade, which is the first year of high school. And I finished high school when I was serving at Word of Life, and I went to college, and I did a major in youth ministry, and I took up office. Folks, God did all that. I am here as a testimony today because God did it. I did not. And I know that today you're seated there and you're wondering, is he real? Can he use me? Yes, he can. And he just want to use you the way you are. You come to him the way you are, and he's going to make you into what he wants you to be. You see, in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, I no longer live. You no longer live. Christ lives in you. Your life belongs to him. And I hope that as you go through this session, I hope that Romans chapter 12 will be true to you, that you will offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, because that's your spiritual act of worship.